The bottom line is that I believe Donald Trump would be an absolute, utter disaster for the Republican Party, destroy conservatism as we know it. We would get wiped out, and it would take generations to overcome a Trump candidacy. It would destroy our party. I hope the Republican senators know that, because it is a reality, and it will not help the country. The most important thing, impeaching him after he leaves office will be disastrous for this country and our party.
So in 2016, Lindsey Graham said electing Donald Trump would destroy the Republican Party.
Yes.
Prescient. Now he says convicting him would do the same.
It's interesting because Lindsey at one point had said, maybe a week ago, week and a half ago, after the riots, after we find out the rioters were coming to kill
that was so
Mike
horrible.
Pence, the vice president of the United States, and were coming to kill Nancy Pelosi. And in fact, we have news that they were only minutes away, possibly seconds away from running into Mike Pence, getting Mike Pence and doing serious bodily damage to him, possibly killing him, his family. And now Lindsey is saying, wait a second, I just don't impeach him. Please don't impeach him. But after Mike Pence and Nancy Pelosi and other members of Congress's lives are on the line, Lindsey said, I'm off this.
I'm done.
I'm done with this. I'm done with Donald Trump. And then a couple of idiots chased him through the airport. He switched his position. I tell you what, a couple of idiots chased me through the airport. It's not going to be my problem. It's going to be theirs.
Okay.
I'm surprised that Lindsey is so weak that a couple of people yell at him and he jumps on a plane with the president the next day. It is sad and pathetic. Well,
these are the weak minds that Trump preys upon.
Well, it's just weak. A weak man. Very weak man.
Let's take everyone through where we are at, because a lot transpired over the weekend and a lot more came out about the assault at the Capitol. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe. It is Monday, January 18th, and with us we have White House reporter for the Associated Press, Jonathan Lemire, professor at Princeton University, Eddie Glaude Jr., and U.S. national editor at the Financial Times, Ed Luce, is with us this morning. With a little more than 2 days until Joe Biden will be sworn in, law enforcement is still grappling with the fallout from the deadly January 6th riot. And security around Washington, D.C. is ramping up. According to the Associated Press, U.S. defense officials are worried about a possible insider attack or threat from service members involved in securing the inauguration.
An inside threat in America.
The FBI is vetting all of the 25,000 National Guard troops coming into D.C. for the event. Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy tells the AP they are taking a second, third looks at every one of the individuals assigned to this operation, and that Guard members are also getting training on how to identify potential insider threats. Meanwhile, we continue to learn more information and see more video from the January 6th Capitol Hill riots. The New Yorker published staggering new footage over the weekend from inside the riot. Reporter Luke Mogelson has followed the radical fringe of Trump supporters for 10 months and attended the January 6th rallies in Washington that gave way to the insurrection.
By the way, Mika, he is a veteran war correspondent. And here we have Donald Trump's own war, Donald Trump's own insurrection inside our constitutional republic. It is so, Mika, how disgraceful are these actions of these people that you saw in the video?
Well, it gets worse. As more and more video comes out, you realize there's no turning back from this as being complete and total criminal activity that needs to be held accountable. That's what happens in this country.
And listen, there several times that these cop killers actually are chanting F the cops, screaming and abusing the cops, beating police officers with American flags. And yes, it's not Antifa, it's MAGA.
No, they say who sent them.
It's MAGA. And they talk and they brag about who sent them and say Ted Cruz would want us to be here over and over again. Watch this.
Whose house? We're outnumbered. There's a million of us out there, and we are listening to Trump. You're the boss. Us through. Where the are they? Where are they?
While we're here, we might as well set up a government.
Hey, let's take a seat, people! Let's take a seat!
Hey, Nancy Pelosi.
Let's vote on some Where the is Nancy? Information operation.
There's got to be something in here we can against these scumbags. Who's in government? Or whatever.
Well, Cruz, I think Cruz would want us to do this. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Break all the windows!
Ted Cruz's objection to the Arizona.
Objection. He was going to sell us out all along. Really? Look, objection to counting electoral votes of the state of Arizona. Can I get a photo of that?
Wait, no, that's a good thing.
All right. I'm
He's
pissed.
with us. He's with us.
Ed Luz, it looks like we're watching an insurrection from a foreign country. Fascist thugs overrunning democratic institutions in some Eastern European land, but it is here. It is Washington, D.C., and as we learned last night, Donald Trump's insurrection and Donald Trump's efforts to have a coup, which we've been talking about for quite some time. He wanted to rile people up and have an auto coup. It's led to this, and now even the National Guard is having the FBI check to make sure there's not an inside job to kill elected American officials, including the president and vice president of the United States.
Yeah, that really stark footage, I think, underlines something that's very true about fascist kind of movements. There's a mixture of horror there and a degree of comedy. The comedy being just how ridiculously ill-informed and unrealistic these people were, not just the ones wearing weird costumes, but the ones, wandering in like tourists saying, let's set up a government. I think that you've got a situation now with the National Guard and other law enforcement being given very thorough background checks by the FBI, where we're more worried not about a recurrence of that on Wednesday, but of what I'd think of as an Anwar Sadat, Indira Gandhi kind of situation. The Indian leader and the Egyptian leader, both of whom were killed by their own guards, assassinated by their own guards. And I can imagine that is a nightmarish headache for the FBI and the Secret Service to be looking at, because a lot of those people in that building on that very stark footage were off-duty policemen from other states. There was some serving military there. And of course, there are a number of Capitol Hill police being questioned for sympathies with the rioters. So the idea of anarchy on Wednesday, as I think now with 25,000 troops in this city, probably unlikely. The idea of something else happening, and pipe bombs included, cannot be ruled out. I would not wish to be working for the Secret Service or the FBI this week.
Yeah, and of course, you brought up Anwar Sadat. Had those been Muslim insurrectionists, they would have all been shot and killed at the Capitol, or would be in Gitmo by now. They would be somewhere, and it would have been taken care of. Instead, we see there's still a threat to the United States of America. these traitors that busted in and wanted to kill Mike Pence, the vice president of the United States, wanted to kill Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, wanted to kill the number 2 and number 3 ranking constitutional officers to behead the United States government, our constitutional government. So what? So Donald Trump could run the whole thing himself? Yeah, it doesn't work that way in America, kids. Jonathan Lemire, you are hearing increasing concerns inside law enforcement about the actual inauguration itself and the desire that Joe Biden perform that ceremony like Ronald Reagan did in 1984 inside where they can secure the location. So far, the Biden team still wants to do it outside, right?
Joe, that is right. And I was moving around downtown Washington last night, now just, of course, a few days ahead of the inauguration. And it is striking. There's been a lot of comparisons to the green zone that was established, secure zone established in Baghdad at the beginning of the Iraq War. And some of those parallels seem fitting. Some of the images are so striking that here we are in an American city, an American capital city, and street upon street upon street is blocked off by National Guard, heavily armed vehicles, roads closed everywhere, making it impossible nearly to get around Washington, but also setting the stage for what we're going to see here in this city this week. And the report by my colleagues at the AP is particularly chilling. The idea of looking at potential inside job, the FBI vetting National Guardsmen. And that goes with what the Secret Service has been briefing the Biden campaign in recent days, that one of their real concerns now would be this influx of out-of-state National Guardsmen or other law enforcement agencies, local police, worried that there could be a threat posed from within. And they have been leaning on the Biden camp in recent days to really consider. Now, let's be clear. The Secret Service always looks for the most safe, cautious approach. They're going to present the principal, in this case, Biden, the president-elect, a variety of options. But there's certainly been growing intensity, particularly in the last 72 to 96 hours, fears that something could happen. Of course, we've been on high alert since the Capitol attack, but there's been a new wave of threat. That threat index has really picked up here in the last couple of days, and they are urging the president-elect to really consider moving something indoors to a more secure facility. To this point, Biden and his team are saying no. There's going to be incredible security lockdown, an incredible presence. And obviously this inauguration was going to look different anyway because of the pandemic. We're not going to see hundreds of thousands of people here. There are certainly some visitors from the inauguration moving around Washington right now, but it's going to be a much smaller group than usual because Biden has told people, Americans, watch this at home, celebrate at home. It's just not safe because of the pandemic. But now, of course, there's security concerns from fellow Americans, which is such a hard thing to even get our heads around here as we move to look for a transfer of power. But for now, Joe, President-elect Biden does want the symbolism of a Capitol ceremony. He does want to have this sign as a first step of trying to heal America, bring America together. He's a long list of things he needs to do. He, at least for now, wants to adhere to tradition as best he can on noon on Wednesday.
Well, members of President Trump's failed presidential campaign played key roles in orchestrating the Washington rally that spawned the deadly assault on the Capitol. We're finding out some really chilling things here. According to an Associated Press review of records, undercutting claims the event was the brainchild of the president's grassroots supporters. The AP reports a pro-Trump nonprofit group called Women for America First hosted the Save America rally on January 6th near the White House. But an attachment to the National Park Service public gathering permit granted to the group lists more than half a dozen people in staff positions for the event who just weeks earlier had been paid thousands of dollars by Trump's 2020 re-election campaign. Other staff scheduled to be on site during the demonstration have close ties to the White House. In a statement, the president's re-election campaign said it did not organize, operate, or finance the event, and that no campaign staff members were involved in the organization or operation of the rally. It said that if any former employees or independent contractors for the campaign took part, they did not do so at the direction of the Trump campaign. The AP's review found at least 3 of the Trump campaign aides named on the permit rushed to obscure their connections to the demonstration. They deactivated or locked down their social media profiles, removed tweets that referenced the rally, and blocked a reporter who asked questions. Those aides include Caroline Wren, a veteran GOP fundraiser who was named as a VIP advisor on an attachment to the rally permit. Between mid-March and mid-November, Donald J. Trump for President Incorporated paid her $20,000 a month, according to Federal Election Commission records. And Maggie Mulvaney, a niece of former top Trump aide Mick Mulvaney, who was listed on the permit attachment as the VIP lead. FEC records show Maggie Mulvaney was earning $5,000 every 2 weeks from Trump's re-election campaign, with the most recent payment reported on November 13th. Meanwhile, the personal accounts of the Capitol rioters reveal the impact of President Trump's words on his most loyal supporters. Some felt called to Washington by Trump's false claims of a stolen election, while others believed they were carrying out the president's direct orders at his rally that day. According to a criminal complaint, a retired firefighter charged with assaulting members of the Capitol Police Force told a friend he went to the building following, quote, the president's instructions. And this is what a Texas real estate agent accused of breaching the Capitol told a reporter about her involvement.
I thought I was following my president. I thought I was following what we were called to do. He asked us to be there, so I was doing what he asked us to do.
All right. So
she's, by the way, asking for a pardon.
yeah, she's asking for a pardon. Exactly. So, Eddie, Donald Trump, Donald Trump's campaign, Donald Trump supporters, people that were getting paid a lot of money by the Trump campaign and then decided to organize this riot are trying to run. But, you know, there's nowhere to run, baby, nowhere to hide. I think the Supreme's saying that one. And there's really not. I mean, by the time the feds are finished investigating this, they've got a trail that leads straight back to Donald Trump, straight back to Donald Trump's campaign. And this is only the beginning of the investigation.
Only the beginning, Joe. And you're right. There's no way they can hide from this. There is a sense in which we've known for the last 4 years, since Donald Trump came down the escalator, that his objective has been to exploit, to leverage a sense of disaffection, resentment, and grievance for his own political ends and benefit. We've heard in the run-up to the election, during the election, and post-election, Donald Trump trying to delegitimize the democratic results, delegitimize the votes of particularly African Americans, and again, to leverage, to play on the sense of resentment, grievance, and alienation of a particular part of his constituency. And we also know for the last 4 years, he's been lying through his teeth. The people around him have been lying through their teeth. So the default position is not to believe them. It's not to believe them. It's to think that they're lying. And, you know, Joe, I was sitting here thinking about this in terms of U.S. history in the mid-20th century. The United States is not innocent of political assassination. We're not innocent of kind of discord. I'm thinking about that extraordinarily difficult period between 63 and 68, where we watched the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the assassination of Martin King, the assassination of Bobby Kennedy. And what was at the heart of it? What was at the heart of it is that America was morphing. We were changing. We were trying to address a central contradiction at the heart of the country. And here we are in the midst of this, the sacking of the People's House, the selfishness of a political leader, and we are dealing with that contradiction right now.
And again, the difference between now and then, now and any other time since the Civil War, is that we have a president who is trying to undermine the Constitution. It is the president himself who is trying to lead an insurrection against the United States of America, against the government, against the Constitution, against constitutional safeguards. That makes this unlike any other time since Jefferson Davis became president of the Confederacy. And I know there are a lot of people who support Donald Trump who like drawing that parallel. Well, it's an accurate parallel because Jefferson Davis was a traitor to the United States of America, and so was Donald Trump. And he continues to be. And if any of his supporters don't think he is, I'd love to know what their justification is, because this is a riot that started to kill the vice president of the United States and to kill the Speaker of the House and to tear to shreds the Capitol. Just look at that information and look at the pictures of them banging on the doors, wanting to kill people, saying they were coming for them, screaming in anger and disgust when they went through the Senate chambers, screaming, "Where are they? Where did they go?" And Ed Luce, it's interesting. I've been talking to several pretty well-placed sources through the weekend, also talking to friends in journalism. And they're all coming to the same conclusion about Mitch McConnell. You know, the instant take on Mitch McConnell saying we're not going to take this up in the next week or so was that he was somehow trying to protect the president. It's taken some of us a little while to figure out that that's the last thing Mitch McConnell's doing. Mitch McConnell probably knew when he said he was going to delay it, that the longer this plays out, the worse it looks for Donald Trump. And sure enough, here we are, 11 days later, and more footage is coming out. More connections to Donald Trump are being revealed. And the longer this goes, the more Donald Trump is going to be attached directly to the rioting and the killing of these police officers.
I think the arrests that are being made, the social media postings, the sort of celebratory mea culpas that you've seen from so many of the participants in this assault on democracy, I think speaks of, making the job of the police and law enforcement a little bit easier, but also the naivety of some of them. But then on the other hand, there are clearly hardcore militia types here who had organized and nefarious plans to take out, as you say, decapitate leadership. So those are being uncovered. And I've no doubt that you're right when you say, as time goes on, this looks worse. And that the legal objection, the constitutional objection to impeaching an office holder after they've left office is pretty weak, according to constitutional scholars I've listened to. I think, though, the question here remains about what McConnell himself ultimately wants to do. I think he's testing the waters. I think, we have here it's MLK Day, Martin Luther King Day. He said it's always the right time to do the right thing. And that's clearly never been the watchword of the Republican Party. Ben Sasse is now saying the right thing. He wasn't before his re-election last year. Lindsey Graham, as you quoted at the beginning of the program, said the right thing in 2016. He isn't now. I would be interested on this MLK Day, and on this day when Alexei Navalny, the Russian dissident who the KGB tried to kill, goes back to Russia, knowing full well what he's going back to, showing the kind of courage that I would like to see Ben Sasse show all the time. It's always the right time to do the right thing. So I think there's going to be a huge test of character and of courage of Republicans who've always known who Trump is. They cannot pretend that, it was fine until this happened, as some have been saying. They have always known who Trump is. And I think this will be a fascinating test, including of McConnell, of whether they have character.
Well, Ben Sasse can also start by showing courage by actually calling for the expulsion of Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz. 6 years until he has to run for re-election. And so, nothing like Navalny going back to Russia where he knows his life is on the line. He can start by actually criticizing his own Senate colleagues by name and calling for their expulsion.
All right, still ahead on Morning Joe, more from Senator Lindsey Graham, who appears to ignore President Trump's role in the Capitol riot and instead pointing the finger at, wait for it, Nancy Pelosi. Plus, President Trump is facing a second impeachment trial, but who is working on his defense? You're watching Morning Joe. We'll be right back with much more.
America is about to not be great again.
The speech the fake media didn't want you to know about is now available for download. Hasta la vista, America is Trump's farewell address. Well, it's Trump's farewell address, imagined by Kurt Anderson and performed by Alec Baldwin. Available exclusively at atrumpfarewell.com. It's just 99 cents.
Shouldn't we be charging more?
Hi, everyone. Steve Kornacki here. You may remember I hosted an NBC News podcast called Article 2, Inside Impeachment, that followed the developments of President Donald Trump's first impeachment last winter. The Article 2 podcast is back with a special episode, bringing you the latest on the second impeachment of Donald Trump. I'm joined by NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell, who was in the Capitol on the day of the riots to break down the House vote and what a Senate trial could look like. Search for Article 2, Inside Impeachment, wherever you're listening right now, to subscribe for free.
Eddie, I think this is an especially poignant time to talk about Martin Luther King on this MLK Day, and also to talk about what happened in 2020. You and I have been talking for quite some time about how we synthesize our dual realities. That we had an extraordinary group of political philosophers at the beginning of this republic who created documents that freed more men and women and liberated more men and women than anybody in the history of this world. It was a revolution, and yet most were slaveholders. And the question is, how do you synthesize that? Also, especially after 2020, when many people like you and me believed that that constitutional republic was at risk. Who saved that constitutional republic created, for the most part, by white slaveholders? It was black women in Wisconsin, in Milwaukee County, and Wayne County, Michigan, and Atlanta, Georgia, Fulton County, Georgia. I mean, you want to talk about irony. The American experiment lives today because of black voters in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. How remarkable is that?
Yeah, Joe. I mean, we've been having this conversation for a number of years, and we saw it in real time over this last election cycle. But, when we think back on American history, we know that what is challenged, what has been the contradiction, what has been the serpent wrapped around the legs of the table upon which the Constitution was signed, the Declaration of Independence was crafted, was this belief that white people matter more than others, that this ideology of whiteness. And we want to just distinguish this. I mean, it's hard for us to do in this moment. But we think about every moment of crisis. Most of the major moments of crises in this country where we've challenged the basic precepts of democracy. It has been in defense of this belief that this country ought to remain a white nation in the vein of old Europe. When we think about, just really quickly, when we think about the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, and we think about radical Reconstruction, Joe, and then we think about the Compromise of 1877, what was that about? That was about an ideology. Of course, there were economic underpinnings, but that was an ideology that insisted that the nation had to be a white nation in the vein of old Europe. And Hitler's Germany would look to us as a model, as scholars at Yale have written about. And when we think about the mid-20th century and Dr. King's sacrifice and the sacrifice of everyday ordinary people for us to actually make good on the promises of radical Reconstruction, this is why scholars call it the Second Reconstruction. Why was it undermined? How did we roll it back? It had everything to do with this consensus behind us. And what's so interesting about the recent moment is that we saw people sacking the Capitol in defense of a world that Dr. King sacrificed his life to destroy. Those people are cleaving to a world that Dr. King gave his life to dismantle. It is up to you and me, Joe, and others, for us to begin the hard work of imagining America apart from this insidious view that some people ought to be valued more because of the color of their skin. We have to finally uproot that so we can step into the promise of American life.
And, you know, Mika, there has been so much progress, so much racial progress in this country since 1963, since the year of my birth. Just 6 years later, I was playing on playgrounds in rural Mississippi with an integrated class of black and white kids. So much progress made through the 70s and 80s and 90s and with the election of President Obama. So many things that we have seen that many Americans would not have believed we would have seen in the year of my birth. And at the same time, as I said just last week, if those rioters had been from Anacostia, and if they had been black, they would have been shot in the face and killed. If they had been organizing a protest to disrupt the election and had bragged about that protest coming on December the 6th, there never would have been a protest. You know why? They would have never gotten the permits, and security would have been so tough that the first 15 people coming together talking about insurrection, if they were black, they would have been beaten and dragged off to jail. And I will say, again, if they had been Muslim, they would have been shot and sent to Gitmo. So we have made extraordinary progress, and yet here we have staring in our face another example of how police officers, at least at the Capitol, on that day, treated white people differently than they would have treated black people, Hispanics, how they would have treated Muslims differently. And that look is a look that black Americans say they see every day.
Yeah, and just to sort of parse a little bit here, there was some of that. There was also a major situation where the Capitol Police were completely outnumbered. And those details will come out. And the progress that you talk about and the promise of MLK makes these setbacks even more heartbreaking, quite frankly, if that's possible. The number of arrests around the country linked to the Capitol siege continue to grow. As of this morning, the FBI has charged an additional 74 people with crimes tied to the riots. The total number of arrests now stands at 116 people. That's expected to increase as a law enforcement official tells NBC News that there are still more than 300 open cases. The FBI says it has received tips containing more than 150,000 separate photos and videos. The Washington Post reports that U.S. Capitol Police had intelligence 3 days before the attack, warning that the Capitol itself might be targeted by angry Trump supporters.
And let me stop right there. Again, Mika, let's keep talking about this, but what if they had been warned 3 days before? And Eddie, I'll go back to you. What if they had been warned 3 days before that angry black protesters talking about insurrection were going to be coming to the Capitol? Think they may have prepared differently? Of course, there were Capitol Hill cops who were doing all they could do. You look at the video.
They were outnumbered.
And many of them are heroes. There were a couple that deserve the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Yes.
But this is important to remember. None of this would have happened if it had been angry, black, radical insurrectionists that were bragging about a coming rally and riot in the nation's capital to overturn election results. Eddie, I'll just put that ball on the tee, and you just hit that ball out of the park.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully I won't whiff. But, look, it seems to me it's very clear that in this country, there is a version of citizenship for some people, that they're free to dissent, that they're free to express their ownership of the country, their sense that America is theirs. And then there are others of us who need to shut up and just be grateful. And that different expression of citizenship, Joe, was on full view, right, on January 6th.
Full view.
And we know folks wouldn't have made it to the Capitol, Joe. They would have been at their homes locking folks up. We know that. And if they would have showed up, we would have had numbers of body bags. We know that, Joe. We know it.
So let me continue with the reporting. That intel that I was talking about, according to the New York Times, prompted Capitol Police to ask the House and Senate Sergeant at Arms for additional help from the National Guard. But sources tell the Times that 2 officials denied the request without checking in with Majority Leader Mitch McConnell or House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Former sergeants at arms tell the paper that the officials who have since resigned would most likely have had to check in with congressional leaders before making such important decisions.
Let's bring in right now the former chief of staff at the CIA and Department of Defense, now an NBC national security analyst, Jeremy Bash. Jeremy, where is this investigation going?
Well, the recriminations are flying, Joe. I mean, you've got the Capitol Police saying they wanted some support, but those were denied by the Sergeant-at-Arms offices. You've got the National Guard folks saying they offered to support the January 6 events and the Capitol Police denied it. But I think the reality is that what you're seeing, all this activity by the FBI, by law enforcement to go after and arrest people, that's all great. But that's all right of the boom. And in intelligence, you really want to be left of the boom. You want to be way out ahead of the events. And I think we're going to have to reset our entire intelligence approach to these white supremacist militias, these dangerous ultra-nationalist organizations. I think we're going to have to look at greater surveillance of them. The FBI is going to have to run confidential sources. We're going to have to penetrate these plots long before they present a violent threat to our democracy if we want to have any hope of stopping these in the future.
So, Jeremy, what do we do? What can law enforcement agencies do to make sure that you don't have judges who are sympathetic to the insurrectionists, who are sympathetic to sedition against the United States of America? We saw the picture of the man who invaded Nancy Pelosi's office and kicked his feet up on her desk, and then got the news that a judge had released him already. What do we do to make sure that judges who are sympathetic to insurrection against the United States of America don't do what that judge did? How can the charging authorities make sure that these people stay in jail?
Boy, that's hard, Joe, because, of course, federal judges have lifetime tenure, so you're relying essentially on the appellate courts to overrule idiotic decisions by lower courts to release people who pose a clear and present danger. But, Joe, I have to also say, I think that although a lot of the recriminations and a lot of the analysis discuss the security modalities of January 6th and what's happening for the inauguration, I actually think we need a blue ribbon commission to look at the bigger issue in our country, which is the big lie, the brainwashing, because people don't get radicalized overnight. This was a long, deliberate effort by political leaders led by Donald Trump to brainwash, to create a cult, to basically inculcate a big lie. It started with a small lie. You know, my inauguration crowd was bigger than somebody else's. That's a little lie that happened 4 years ago. It morphed into a big lie. And if you look at the history of fascism and the history of radicalization, the history of terrorist organizations, they always have at the center of it a big lie.
So Jonathan Lemire is with us and has a question for you. Jonathan.
Jeremy, on the point of the big lie, certainly a lot of the evidence of people who believe in that is online, right? QAnon, other conspiracy theorists. And it seems like a lot of that was missed or ignored. Warning signs ahead of January 6th, people who were posting threats, posting that there was going to be a storming of the Capitol. And with that as the backdrop, can you tell us the latest in terms of what you're hearing from your contacts in the intelligence world as to what people are preparing for on January 20th? The inauguration is now just 2 days away. There have been other postings, it seems to be, from our reporting, people threatening more action that day and others. Give us an update, and how dire is the security situation we're seeing, which includes now, according to reporting, fear of insider attacks?
No doubt, Jonathan, there is a plethora of online threats. And you saw that, by the way, in the run-up to January 6th. And this is one of the things I think have to be analyzed, which is why weren't our law enforcement agencies analyzing social media? Why weren't they analyzing the threat stream? Not just in the days and weeks leading up to January 6th, but there were clear indicators from social media on the day of, the morning of the attacks that could have got the force posture better. So we have to, I think, press the Secret Service, the FBI, the National Guard to utilize all of those technical capabilities for January 20th. I think there's grave concern. Now, look, the show of force of 25,000 National Guard troops in the Capitol, I think, has tamped down some of the concerns. Of course, the threats of a January 17th set of activities did not materialize, I think, in large part because of that large show of force. But the idea of trying to rerun the background checks of 25,000 National Guardsmen and women in 3 days is a daunting task. And so everybody's just going to have to be on heightened alert. And if there's, a see something, say something dynamic, they're going to have to be able to shift quickly and change the plans, try to be a little bit unpredictable, and just try to protect this peaceful transfer of power as best as we can. And then I think we've got the long, arduous work ahead of us of trying to understand what these organizations are plotting, where the soft targets are in our country, and how we can get left of boom.
So, Jeremy, I just did a quick check, a quick follow-up while you were answering that question. It ends up that he was released by a magistrate to stay at home to await his trial, and the U.S. Attorney's Office appealed that, and now he is back in jail. So that's a good move. But what is the likelihood that a good number of these people that we saw storming through the Capitol, especially if they were searching for members, get 20 years, get sedition, get the book thrown at them for going in and destroying the People's House, destroying the Senate chamber, and trying to overthrow election results of a Democratic election?
Yeah, Joe, I mean, you'd hope that the book would be thrown at him, but I think we have to confront a reality here, which is that a lot of these people are going to hide behind the First Amendment, hide behind free expression, and they're going to try to argue that they're no different than other demonstrators in our capital city, when, of course, they're so different because they crossed that critical line of violence. And on a MLK Day, I think it's important to remember that when Dr. King preached nonviolence, that stands in stark contrast to the idea that people would go through the Capitol, yell, "Hang Mike Pence," kill a police officer, kill someone sworn to protect us, resulting in five other people dying. You've got vandalism. You've got threats. You've got the ultimate expression of violent insurrection. And I think this is so qualitatively different than anything else that we've seen in the history of nonviolent demonstration in our country that I do believe, Joe, the book has to be thrown at him to send a deterrent signal to other would-be violent offenders.
Yeah, this had nothing to do with the First Amendment. This had everything to do with sedition against the United States of America. Mika, they all need to be locked up.
Absolutely.
If they go into if they broke into the United States Capitol, they all need to be locked up.
Jeremy Bash, thank you very much for being on this morning. And coming up, new research shows President Trump's ban from Twitter has had quite an impact on the level of online misinformation about voter fraud. We're going to dig into that information ahead on Morning Joe.
Hey everyone, it's Tremaine Lee, MSNBC correspondent and host of the podcast Into America. The sacking of the U.S. Capitol building may have felt un-American to some, but that kind of racialized political violence is as American as apple pie. This week on Into America, I'm sharing the story of the only successful coup in U.S. history. I talked to the descendant of a survivor about what happened when a mob of white supremacists overthrew the local government in Wilmington, North Carolina, in response to black progress in the city.
After November 10th, 1898, black people have been at a loss in this community.
Plus, Xavier University history professor Dr. Charlene Senegal DeQueer explains why knowing our past is the first step to ending this cycle of violence. Search for Into America wherever you're listening now and subscribe.
Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny has been detained after defiantly flying back to Moscow yesterday, months after he was left in a coma when he was poisoned with the nerve agent Novichok. Facing the threat of arrest upon touching down, Navalny, a prominent critic of the Kremlin and Russian President Vladimir Putin, boarded a plane in Berlin where he had been evacuated for treatment in August from a hospital in Siberia at the insistence of his family. The plane was diverted shortly before it landed. Navalny's press officer confirmed in a tweet without explaining why the plane was rerouted. His spokesman also posted a video of Navalny being escorted away by officials, saying he was being detained without explanation and was not allowed to bring his lawyer. He hugged his wife before police led him away. Russia's Federal Penitentiary Service released a statement confirming that Navalny was being detained allegedly for repeated violations of the probationary period, whatever that means. He will remain in custody until he can appear in court, the statement said. Jake Sullivan, President-elect Joe Biden's appointee as National Security Advisor, denounced Navalny's detention and insisted that those who poisoned him must be held accountable.
I wonder if Pompeo said anything like that. No, he didn't actually.
Not so much.
Because he's a dupe.
I think he
for
said a
Putin
little
as well.
something, but there's so much other stuff he should be saying right now about his own
Not about
country.
Pompeo.
It falls flat. Ed Luce, why would Navalny go back to his country knowing that he would be arrested?
I think to make a point that, I mean, the guy has been, although he has help, pretty much a lone ranger. Other opposition figures in Russia, like Boris Nemtsov. There's a street just up the road from me here in Washington, just outside the Russian embassy, now renamed the Boris Nemtsov Street, have been killed or disappeared or exiled. And he's really the sole credible opposition figure to Putin in Russia. And I think to demonstrate through his actions that it's only with courage and with persistence that a strong man like Putin can be taken on. I don't know where this is going to end up. There's already been a Potemkin trial held in a police station, or being held as we speak. And I don't know what they're going to do with him, whether they're going to jail him or release him. And if he's released, whether he's safe, well, either way. But he is, make no mistake, putting his life into his enemy's hands. So, you know, on MLK Day, we should make that emphasis of what the courage that's on display here.
And the courage not on display, obviously, out of Washington, D.C., where the Trump administration is silent. You had the acting Secretary of Defense a few days ago praising the Russians for information warfare against the United States of America, said you've got to hand it to them. And Jonathan Lemire, we've seen time and again the President of the United States cower in the shadow of Vladimir Putin, cower when he put bounties on the heads of U.S. servicemen and women, cower, obviously, after this arrest, cower after the poisoning. And of course, you had a very up close and personal look at just how frightened Vladimir Putin makes Donald Trump when you asked a question in Helsinki. Tell us about it.
Joe, under no circumstance do you have to hand it to Russia here. And you're right. We have seen this president be subservient to Vladimir Putin throughout his time in office, dating back from his 2016 campaign, where he praised Putin repeatedly as a great man. And yes, in Helsinki, when I asked him who he believed in terms of 2016's the election interference, whether he believed the conclusions of his own intelligence agencies or whether he believed Vladimir Putin, Trump made clear he believed Putin. He wasn't going to take that moment to challenge the Russian leader. And I will say, Joe, as a final point on this is part of the challenge that Joe Biden inherits. For so long, the U.S. presidency has been one where they have whoever has inhabited that office has tried to shine a light among human rights abuses, to try to encourage democracy around the world in global hotspots, show the misconduct of tyrants and dictators and authoritarians. And that is something that Donald Trump simply has not done at all since taking office. And that is something that has really damaged one of the many things this president, foreign policy experts believe, has done to damage the United States' credibility around the globe. Joe Biden comes into office on Wednesday needing to repair so much at home, the pandemic, the economy, this insurrection, but also the standing of America around the world in calling for democracy.
And our relationship
100%.
with Russia needs to improve, but that burden is not on the United States of America. It is on Russia. We've had every president this century more than meet Vladimir Putin halfway. You had Barack Obama talking about a reset. Of course, Donald Trump, the past 4 years, has cowered at the mere mention of Vladimir Putin. You had George W. Bush saying that he looked into his eyes and saw into his heart. Well, this is a guy who invaded Georgia when Bush was president, invaded Ukraine when Obama was president, and interfered with American democracy, basically invaded the United States of America to get Donald Trump elected any way he could to try to help elect Donald Trump. At the end, I think Donald Trump won because more people voted for Donald Trump in the key states. But Putin tried to interfere with that election. And Mika, he's continued. The Biden campaign is going to have a tough policy toward Russia. And if Russia wants to build that relationship, it's going to start with them breaking 20 years of very bad habits.
Still ahead, shocking new video released by The New Yorker is giving us another look at just how violent the Capitol riot was as Trump supporters stormed the building searching for lawmakers. We'll be joined by The New Yorker's David Remnick. You're watching Morning Joe. We'll be right back.
Hi, it's MSNBC's Hayes Brown. You know, these days there's just so much news to wrap your head around, it's challenging to get a deeper understanding of things. So every morning, go beyond the headlines with MSNBC Daily. It features written perspectives from people you know and trust, including Trymaine Lee, Mehdi Hasan, Liz Plank, and Frank Figliuzzi. They'll take you inside the most important issues of our times. Issues like systemic racism, domestic terrorism, and how we can bridge our political divide. Plus, you'll get a fresh take every morning from me. Start your day with MSNBC Daily at msnbc.com.